Now you're coming in. We're calling you, we're saying it's time for that interview. What are we going to look for as employers? We're going to look for the fact that you did your homework, so you're coming in with confidence. Your head's up, your shoulders back, you're smiling, you're looking put together, you're confident, you're ready to greet us with that professional handshake. Okay, I have to do this because I still struggle with this sometimes. There is etiquette to the professional handshake, and that is that your hands should meet at the webbing, okay? Ladies, I love you, but the manicure handshake doesn't cut it, okay? And I say ladies because more so it's the ladies than the gentlemen that do this. So hands meet at the webbing. Nice firm grip. And gentlemen, you don't need to prove to me you can bench press 14,000 pounds. I appreciate that you're strong men out there, but just a couple of pumps, firm grip, look me in the eye, smile at me. It forces me to focus on you. You mean business. You're allowing me to now start to get to know you, and we can move through this whole process. Lots of positions have functions that we can teach you, but personality I can't teach you. And folks are gonna work with who they like. So smile, look for some things that can spark some small talk. Maybe you walk in and you see, a Sonics banner up there. Gosh, isn't it too bad that the Sonics aren't part of our city anymore? This tells me that you can talk to me. You can make some small talk. You have interpersonal skills. You can work in teams. So use that personality. We can teach you many of the skills that you'll need to be successful, okay? Even with very technical jobs, engineering, chemists, all these folks, they still want to like who they're working with. So show me that as you go into that interview. Enthusiasm. When you're there, you should want to be there. You've done your research. You know this position's a great match for you. So speak up, talk to me, show me some excitement. All right? If you're walking by a Ferrari and you're interested in it, you're just going to go, whatever. Oh, I don't think so. You're going to be sitting in that seat. You're going to be feeling that leather. You're going to be looking all up in those buttons, right? Smelling it, touching it. Oh, those are buying signs. So when I'm talking to you and you're leaning forward, you're showing me some excitement, you're telling me about yourself in a confident manner, I'm thinking, okay, this person's here for real. Someone's come out to play. Let's do this, right? You're getting me excited. But if you're going to be shy and you're going to talk quietly and you're just going to, yeah, actually, I'm really excited about this position. And then, oh, I need to speak up. Okay, I'm really excited about this position. And folks, I know sometimes we have cultural concerns that can keep us from maybe expressing ourselves. But in the American job market, when you're interviewing for positions, we want that eye contact. We want that projection. We want that enthusiasm. The rest of these items, work ethic, dedication, being a team player, there are a lot of ways you can actually exhibit these that people don't think about. I have a colleague, Robert Lurch. He's the head of my business sales division, and he has a rule for his sales department. If you're going to a meeting and you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't bother. We notice these things. When you're coming in and you're prepared, you showed up early, you didn't come out of your car, ladies, all yanking up on all your nylons, right? Gentlemen, tucking in your shirt, tying your tie. We see that. My boss's office is right by our parking lot. And when we see candidates coming out, still getting dressed, coming out of their car, again, we laugh at you. And we remember you for things that are not very flattering. Dedication, you want to be ready to talk about the things that are engaging and ways that you can show you were really involved in these things that you were a part of in school or at your work. And we'll talk about that more. Team player, I like to bring this up because tip for you. Be nice to the receptionist. I had a receptionist down in Southern California. She was great. African-American woman, just adorable, always impeccably dressed, put together, very professional. As folks would come in, she'd have to hand over some paperwork to our candidates. And after the candidate left, I would go over and be like, so what'd you think? Sometimes she'd say, they're all right. Really? Yeah, pretty good, whatever. But boy, when she had an opinion, so what'd you think? Oh, Girl came walking all up in here with attitude, okay? I was like, good morning, I have some paperwork for you. Yeah, took the paper, sat down, didn't even say hi to me, okay? Like came up in here with, like she had the job. I don't think she has no job just yet. Okay, the whole office could hear her, right? Everyone could hear her and everybody knew when she didn't like a candidate. Think about that. I'm in the service business. We rent cars to people who've been broken down, been in accidents. If you cannot be nice to the least of these, how am I going to know you're going to give good service to my customers? So there are a lot of ways you can impact that environment, that exchange as you walk into this interview. Traditional interviewing, you're in my office now, you've done all these great things. We used to ask questions like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? There's a little bit of fudge factor that can get thrown into that. Because I can tell you, sure, in 10 years, I'm going to be sitting on a beach, right? Got a cabana boy, nice yacht out there. I can make stuff up. So this type of interviewing technique really isn't used very often anymore. It's kind of our warm-up now in trying to get to know you. Instead, you'll have a lot of my colleagues actually using what we call the behavioral model of interviewing. Have you heard this term before, behavioral interviewing? Yes? Okay, do we know what it stands for, what the premise is behind it? I know it's on the board. Okay? Behavioral interviewing is based on that concept that if I can get you to talk about some recent behaviors under certain circumstances, you're likely going to repeat that behavior if you're placed in similar circumstances in the future. Okay? So for those of you who have been in sales, if you were in sales and you like sales and you are able to articulate that well, you'll probably ring true, right, to that interviewer. But if you were in sales and you didn't like it, and you talk about every customer was grumpy and every customer just was horrible and you hated it, you're probably not going to do well in my sales role. So that's kind of the premise behind it. We want to see or hear, specific examples, specific circumstances and situations. And we want to focus on what have you done? What have you accomplished? Rather than what do you hope to do? What do you think you're going to be able to do down the road? There are certain buzz phrases that come through when you are in this model. So if you're hearing things like, can you tell me about a time? Can you describe a situation when? Have you ever been? Tell me. These are all your flags that tell you you are in the middle of a behavioral interview model and there's a certain way that you want to be able to answer these questions. So if there's something that you walk away from this evening with, please take this. The STAR system is the most efficient way to answer interview questions when you are in the behavioral model. STAR stands for S, the situation, T, the task at hand, A, the action that you took. Your colleagues out there today fall into the trap of saying, we did this in the group. We asked this person to do that. We were part of blah, blah, blah. I'm not looking to hire we. I want to hire you. So you've got to start to feel comfortable saying, I did this, I impacted that, I took the lead role in it, and this was the R result. Many people fail to put that result into that interview piece. They tell me about all the great projects they were a part of, but they don't tell me that they got a B or an A- or started the quarter or semester with a D and brought it up to an A-. Tell me about the result. Using the STAR system, think of a situation, the task at hand, the action you took, and tell me what the result. If you can do that, you're going to be able to keep yourself focused and keep yourself from rambling. So, we want details. I don't know Mary, who was in your communications class project. It is okay to rat her out and tell me that she didn't turn stuff in on time. Okay? When I started and I told you about my friend Heather, I could have told you there was a gal that was my roommate in college. She went to law school. She did great. She made a lot of money. But I told you her name was Heather White. I told you she worked for O'Melveny & Myers. I told you how much she made, and I told you details because details lend to credibility. Specificity lends to credibility. If you can't talk about the specifics of a situation, it's very difficult for an interviewer or for an employer to get a sense of whether or not you're the right match for our organization. So utilizing that STAR method, thinking about those details, we're going to bring up these job-specific competencies again. Okay? If I wanted to know, for example, a little bit about maybe how well do you set and achieve goals? I may not ask you, how well do you set and achieve goals? What I may ask you could be something along the lines of, can you tell me about a time that you set out to achieve something and failed? Can you tell me about a time when you had achieved something, but monkey wrench got thrown into it and you had to cope? What am I looking for now? Can you tell me about a time when you had to work through cultural differences to be able to achieve a collective objective? What am I looking for now? I want you to get into my head as the hiring manager. I want you to talk to me about your communication effectiveness. Can you tell me about a time when you had to work through cultural differences to achieve something? I might be looking for communication. I might be looking for goal setting. Okay? But if you just say, oh yeah, so there was this guy in my class and he was really hard to talk to or work with because he was always mumbling and stumbling and it was just really difficult, and so it sucked. We didn't do well in the class at all. That tells me nothing. You know what, there's a gentleman in my class who we learned later actually had a speech impediment. So one of the things that I had to learn to do was to sit with him face to face and to have him slowly articulate, speak to me. And by doing that, setting aside an extra 15 minutes every time we had a team meeting to get everything together, we were able to get the job done. And boy, the first project, we probably didn't do so well. But by the third project in that class, we were clicking on all cylinders. We all understood him, he understood us, and we got an A on that final paper. See how that worked? You're telling me a story. You've got a beginning, you've got a middle, you've got an end, and you're giving me specifics. He had a speech impairment. You had a project that you needed to work on. You took the time to sit with him and help him work with you, and in the end, all of you won. Okay? Those are all part of me trying to figure out these core competencies by utilizing that behavioral model. So now it's getting to be time to wrap up that interview, and this can be really awkward for a lot of folks. How do I close an interview, Mylene? What's the appropriate thing to do? Well, hopefully, if you're working with a hiring manager who's worth his or her salt, after they've asked you questions, they're going to give you a chance to ask them questions. This is your chance, much like that informational interview, to try to figure out, is this the right place for me? I'm interviewing you, but you should also be interviewing me. Is this the right place for you? So ask good questions based on research. My favorite story of this, a colleague of mine, her name is Nicole. She used to work with me, and she said, yeah, there was this one guy. He was amazing, impeccably dressed, showed up in a suit, very articulate, great things to say in the interview. She was just so excited about this candidate. Gets to this point in the interview and says, so what questions do you have for me? So he kind of puffs up his chest a little bit, and she's like, yeah, I was a little cocky, but that's okay, whatever, cocky, arrogant, whatever. And he's like, I pride myself on the fact that I keep track of financial markets and pretty in tune with what's happening on Wall Street. I'm really disappointed. Can you tell me why Enterprise's stock has taken such a hit over the last few months? And Nicole she stopped and she said, gosh, I'd love to tell you why our stock has taken a hit, but we're a privately owned company, so we don't trade stocks on the New York Stock Exchange. Right? Wow. Talk about just destroying all of the great stuff he had done early on in the interview. He was so cocky, he was so into showing us he was this great guy that in the end, she said, I was so deflated. I mean, here he was saying, why is your stock price down? You obviously didn't do your research. We're privately held. We don't have stocks. Okay? So ask good questions based on research. We are told you folks care about the environment. You folks care about volunteerism. You care about how we as corporations interact with our communities. Ask us about that then. If it's important to you that you work in a diverse workforce, ask us what we're doing to encourage that. Because guess what? If you're asking me a question like that, it's my turn to go, oh, you want to play like that? Okay, let me tell you about it. I'll give you another tip. The more you get me talking, the more I like you. Boy, this person's great. Because I like to hear myself talk. This is why I do what I do. And as you sit there, I'm telling you, recruiters will be like, I love that person. Why? We just were talking about so many things. To me, that means they were doing a lot of the talking, not the candidate. If you can get that recruiter talking to you, telling you stories, oh boy, do they like you. So ask those questions. Remember to ask, what's the next step? There will always be another step to the process. Very rarely will you have one interview and that's it. And also ask them, gosh, you know what? As we've gone through this process, what do you think of me? Now, this is a double-edged sword, okay? You need to, as I mentioned earlier, tell me what you're going to tell me. Got that resume out there to me. Tell me, you're in that interview with me. This is the time you are now going to tell me what you told me. You know, Mylene, throughout this interview, I heard you ask questions about teamwork. I also heard you ask a lot about how I deal with stress and pressure and coping. I also heard you ask about how I work with people that I may not know or have much in common with. Well, I feel like I answered those questions by giving you some insight to my years playing volleyball at SPU, having lots of people from around the globe coming here, different languages, different backgrounds, and being able to communicate together as a team and win those regional championships. I feel like those are the exact qualities that will help me be the best person that could fill this position. Are there any concerns that you have with what I shared with you today? Are there things that maybe I didn't explain as well as I could have? Do you see how that now puts you in that control of the conversation? It's not the interviewer asking you all these things. You're now saying, here's what I've got for you. Here's what I told you about. Here's why I'm the perfect match for this position, and that's why you should hire me. And if they do have concerns, you've given them an opportunity to let you sell them again. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't articulate myself well enough. Let me give you a different example of how well I communicate with people. You're in the driver's seat now. And now you can close that interview and say, you know, thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. When should I expect to hear from you? Oh, gosh, you know, I've probably got 4 or 5 interviews here the rest of the week. I'm going to be out of town Monday and Tuesday. Probably not till Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Okay, so if I don't hear from you by Wednesday, do you prefer an email or a phone call on Thursday? Do you see how I'm assuming the sale? I'm assuming you want to see me again. You want to presume that sale. It shows your interest. It shows that you want this position, you want this opportunity. And now you've got the commitment of the recruiter. Yeah, you know what? Actually, send me an email. An email on Thursday would be great. Now you know the appropriate way to follow up. You know when you should follow up, and you can hold that person accountable when you follow up. Now don't be a stalker. Okay? Because I'm not going to lie. There are people who will send me 14 emails in the span of a day, and they're asking the same question, and I'm sitting there thinking, really? Really? Now you're just bugging. Now I just don't even want to reach out to you. Okay? But if you say you're going to follow up, send an email or call on Thursday, do that. Take the time to do it. Hi, it's Mylene. I just wanted to check in with you. It's Thursday at 10 o'clock, and I was hoping to hear about the next step in your interview process. Assume you're moving on. Don't wait for them. You want this job. You did your research. You know you're the right person for this. So as you move on, and again, you want to thank them for that handshake, let's make sure we're now making the cut. All right? What does it take to make the cut? Send a thank you note. I know this sounds corny. I know it sounds silly. But I will tell you, for the numbers of interviews that our recruiting team does, and you know, when we're peak hiring season, we can see 300, 400 different candidates coming through our doors, at least showing interest. All right? Now, these are people that aren't randoms off the street. They're just like you. We're the largest recruiter of college graduates, and we hired something like 11,000 people last year. Okay? So these are folks with educations from good families who know better. But out of all those 400 some odd people who apply, my recruiter might get 4 thank you notes. Yeah. Talk about a way to stand out in a positive light. And if you want to cheat, here's another tip for you. Go buy the little 8-pack for $1 at Target. Seriously, $1. Keep them in your car, keep them in your backpack, Keep some stamps in there, and if you're too cheap for stamps, because I get it, I remember when stamps were 5 cents, right? Not anymore. Write that thank you note in your car before you leave that interview. Walk back to that receptionist. Give that reception, thank you so much for helping me out and getting me settled this morning. Would you mind putting this on Mylene's desk? So before you leave that thank you note. Leaves a lasting impression, a personal impression, helps me go, wow, you know, I should remember that individual. And it helps me remember you in a very positive light.